Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 43rd episode of Creatures of the Realm. Here on the DM, Henry Knight, and I go over from A to Z in the Monster Manual and go over creatures, demi-humans, all different type of things in the Monster Manual. I go over them and I basically review it. What's good, what's bad, is it good for your campaign, what type of creature you can use for your campaign. Either way, I review it. And this is what I do in Creatures of the Realm. Before we begin, I have to say that tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central, we have a big game. Episode 8 of the story The Light from Season 2. And Drow City Part 4. It's a wonderful campaign and a great story arc. Join us tomorrow night at 8 p.m. But tonight, we've got a very cool creature. We've got the Goblin. A Goblin is, let's get started. Goblins are small, black-hearted, selfish humanoids that lair in caves, abandoned mines, despoiled dungeons, and other dismal settings. Individually weak, goblins gather in large, sometimes overwhelming numbers. They crave power and regularly abuse whatever authority they obtain. Goblinoids. Goblins belong to a family of creatures called goblinoids. Their large cousins, hobgoblins, and bugbears like to bully goblins in submissions. Goblins are lazy, undisciplined, making them poor servants, laborers, and guards. Malicious glee. Motivated by greed and malice, goblins can't help but celebrate. Few times they have the upper hand. They dance, caper with sheer joy when victory is theirs. Once their revels have ended, goblins delight in the torment of other creatures and embrace all manners of wickedness. Goblins are ruled by the strongest of the smartest among them. Goblin's boss might command a single lair, while Goblin King or Queen, who is nothing more than a glorified goblin boss, rules hundreds of goblins spread out among multiple layers to ensure the tribal's survival. Goblin bosses are easily ousted, and many goblin tribes are taken over by hobgoblin warlords or bugbear chiefs. So, what is a goblin? Heroscape terrain, nice. Yes. Heroscape is cool. The terrain from Heroscape is my buddy George. He's in the campaign. He plays Mavic, and he has all the Heroscape pieces, and I thank him for that, for the background and terrain. It's very cool. How you doing, Mike? How are you? Tonight we're going over the Goblin. How is a Goblin? I mean, what type of how can you use goblins in your game? Their armor class is 15, very little hit points. Their speed is 30. Those are the things you have to look at when you look at goblins. A goblin horde, a group of goblins, they really make a tour de force. Their stealth is a +6, and their senses, dark vision, 60 feet, passive perception of 9. Goblin horde, 50 XPs, challenge rating of 4th. Depends on how you use these guys. You want to use them as a horde. 1 or 2, not so much. You have 10 or more, goblins are great. They usually have maces, scimitars, daggers, archers. They have goblin archers, and they're very good for your campaigns and your need. It all depends on how you use them. And the setting is the main thing for these guys. The weakest part of the goblin, I'd say, intelligence. Here, looking at the stats, intelligence and strength, you have a 10 and an 8 intelligence. A 10 intelligence and 8 strength, excuse me. Those are the things you have to look at as well for a basic goblin. They're very ugly. They have like a crooked nose, elongated ears, very greenish, And the color doesn't really matter. You really want to go ahead and really create your own thing, homebrew goblins. That's up to you. I mean, I'm very open when it comes to homebrew stuff. I love making homebrew creatures, and goblins to me in my games, they're very advantageous. You use a big horde, and they can really make some trouble for your heroes or your players. Now, again, it's not DM against players. It's just part of the story when you have this goblin horde, archers, maces, daggers, whatever they are. They're very great. They're very cool to have in your games. Now, let's continue. The goblin can take the disengage or hide action as a bonus action in each of its turn. Very cool. Because you gotta remember, if you are in a situation where the goblins are trapped or you're cornering them, or wherever they're at on the map, on your battle map, or your combat battle map, these goblins could disengage. They could hide. On a bonus action, that's very cool. A bonus action is very important in the game of Dungeons and Dragons. And if you can do that, it really makes for a lot of strategy. And if you have a goblin horde, they could move on that map very quickly. And 30 feet, believe it or not, is maybe slow to some people, but 30 feet, and if you can disengage, you know, the players already use their actions, and you can disengage on your turn, that's a big deal. Okay, let's see here. They can use scimitars as well. And a +4 to hit, 5 feet of reach. Very good. 5 feet of reach may not be a big deal, but you know, if they are adjacent to you, and normally a miniature, you could tell by miniatures how they're looking. And if you're not playing with miniatures, folks, theater of the mind, I'm an old school gamer, theater of the mind is what I use primarily, but in my games, now I use a mixture of both. And I let the guys know. I know I have a mixed group. Some like theater of the mind, others don't. But miniatures are great for that. You know, you have two miniatures adjacent to each other. You can't say, well, where are they facing? Well, the miniature is facing a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left. At least as a DM and as a player, okay, where's my field of vision? And those of you who've played Warhammer know field of vision, use a string or use a ruler, the miniature's head to the other miniature's head. You know, those are the things you could use that are advantageous to your game and make the game more diverse and fun. Let's see. So, the goblin, the basic goblin, they're neutral evil. They're not going to be good. They're just the way they are. I just said nimble escape, one of his abilities, disengage or hide, and a bonus action. There's archers, short bows, their range to attack, +4 to hit, range 80 to 320 feet. Very, very cool. Now, what's the bad about these goblins? Yeah, Mike made a comment here. It says he's with me on the goblin hit and run tactics, and the 5e disengage ability makes them deadly. Yep, they do. What do we got here? So, what's the good part of the goblin? The hide and disengage. Very cool. I give that 2 thumbs up. The bad, they're not very intelligent. Their wisdom and charisma is low. Their strength is low. So if you have your mages, you have your magic, you can use them. And I know that, I always say this, when you have a group of players, you have your paladin, you have your wizard, warlock, fighter, you got your groups that go up in front in a battle. But if you have your mages and these guys have low wisdom and charisma, when they have to make their saves, they're gonna fail. I mean, unless you get a 20 on a die roll. But they're going to fail. So what's good about this Goblin? The nimble escape, the disengage and hide, that's the best thing out of this basic Goblin. Armor class is 15, that's average for low-level characters. Hit points. Hit points is 7. Again, you're dealing with a Goblin, it's 50 XPs, and challenge rating is a 4th. Hit points is very low. One blast can nail him, depending on your group and how they run in the game. And how close they are, how far they are, that's all in the battle map. Strategy is the number one thing, especially with goblins. If you have a goblin horde, they're going to be deadly. 10 or more can be deadly to a group of 5 or 6 players. Okay, the ugly. The horrible thing about the average goblin. The horrible thing about the average goblin, again, your wisdom, charisma, strength being the lowest of the ability score, and hit points. That's the main ugly thing about the goblin. But there's a lot of good things on this goblin that makes it great for your game and for your DM to use. So I give a goblin, the basic goblin, I give him a C+. And the reason why I give him a C+, because it has more negatives than positives. 1 or 2 positives isn't going to be good for a creature in your game. But again, if you use 10 or more goblins, you're going to have one hell of a time, or the players are going to have one hell of a time. Okay, so let's move on. The goblin boss. The goblin boss is a little more armor class. From a 15, he jumps to a 17. That depending if they have a chain skirt, a shield, stuff like that. This guy usually sits in the back, tells all the goblins what to do. Speed, 30. The hit point changes as well. It's a little beefier. He went from a 7 to a 21. That's very good. Let's look at his strength. Strength went up by 2. Dexterity, the same. Constitution, same. Intelligence, same. Wisdom and charisma. Well, charisma went up a little bit. Okay, so you have a stealth. The stealth is +6. Dark vision, 60 feet. Now, what does that mean in D&D talk? 60 feet. Well, within 60 feet, the goblin can use dark vision. You can see in dim light within a specific range as if it were a bright light. So that is very cool and very advantageous, especially if you're playing a character or a race that cannot see in the dark, and you're in deep shit if you have all these guys coming at you and they can see in the dark and you can't. So that's very good. The goblin boss, again, nimble escape has that thing. Multi-attack. 2 attacks with the scimitar. Very cool. Javelin, very good too. Or a ranged weapon, a +2 to hit. Range, 5 feet. 30 to 120 feet. +3, 1d6 piercing damage. What does that mean in D&D talk? Well, 1d6 piercing damage. The range of the javelin is 30 to 120 feet. And that's very, very, very cool. So the goblin boss sits in the back and tells everybody else what to do. The biggest thing it has here is a reaction. When a creature the goblin can see targets it with an attack, the goblin chooses another goblin with 5 feet of it. 2 goblins swap places, and the chosen goblin becomes the target instead. That's very, very cool to do. Now, challenge rate of 100, 200 XPs. 200 XPs for you. for the players in your game. That's fantastic. This is not just your common goblin. It is the boss. He's very good. You're going to get 200 XPs out of this. So imagine you have a player. You have players 6 to 12. Not 6 to 12. You have 6 players per se, and they are going into the cavern. And all of a sudden, they see a whole bunch of goblins. You slaughter all these goblins, and then you see the boss. The boss, of course, is going to act like all the other goblins. Just because he's a boss doesn't mean anything. He's gonna try to take the other goblins. He has this reaction to redirect. He grabs the goblin, puts him in front of him. That's what he does. And he swaps places with him. That's kind of a coward move, but that's what they do. That's part of their persona. Now, goblins are very cool. They're deadly in mass numbers. So just remember that. Okay, so what's the good about a goblin? The good thing about the goblin boss, a high armor class, and the XP. For a low-level character, 21 XP can be deadly, and a high armor class as well. You're going to have issues bringing them down. Number one, the good. What are other things that are good? That reaction, that redirect attack is very good, where you grab another goblin, put him in front of him, swap places. He chooses whoever become the target instead. That's very, very, very cool for a reaction. It's number 2 that's good about this. Number 3, nimble escape. I mentioned that with the common goblin. Disengage or hide. Those are 3 very cool aspects about the goblin boss. And there's a 4th. I love his javelin and scimitar attacks. Scimitar attack, and compared to the common, you have a +4, 5 feet of range. It does pretty much the same thing as the common, but I love using that scimitar. I'm a big scimitar fan. Javelin. The common goblin does not have a javelin. He can use one, but this dude right here, this guy, the boss, has a javelin. From 30 to 120 feet, he can throw this javelin. And 1d6 piercing damage. Those are the really good things about the goblin boss. So you have your good, bad. Now let's talk about the bad. What makes this guy bad? Well, like everybody else, you have, remember I said high armor class. Your hit points are 21. I'm going to check my levels here, streaming wise. Okay, we're good. So, what's bad about the goblin boss? Overconfidence. Think about it. Guys, DMs out there, you're the goblin boss, you're sitting on your chair, you're throwing whatever it is. You have your hordes, you're going out killing people for you. They're bringing back treasure, trinkets, whatever they find in the underground tunnels. And this guy sits back and he waits. That's all he does. He eats, does whatever. He's going to be lazy. That's not a good aspect. So if you look at his intelligence, pretty much the same, except intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Not much. Stats are not, except for the strength. That's it. Everything else is the same. So, except charisma went up a little bit because he's the boss, right? So the boss is going to call the shots. Of course, his charisma is going to go up. So now, what is the weakness to this goblin boss? The bad. I told you the good, the bad. The bad is his overconfidence, and he's going to sit back. He's not much, by far, he's not much from the common goblin. He might be a tad bit charismatic. He might persuade people a little bit, but not by much. So this guy's going to have issues right there. 2, ugly. What's the worst thing about this guy? I've already mentioned the redirect attack, the good things, nimble escape. What's the worst thing of the goblin boss? And you can look at it as role-playing. He's got a scimitar. He's got a javelin sitting at his side in a throne room. What makes him bad and ugly? Those are the things. What is his issue? He's overconfident. I mentioned the ugly, the bad. He's overconfident. He's going to sit there and he's going to wait till the enemy gets to get to him. But he's going to run away. The ugly. When the enemy finally arrives and knocks out all the other goblins, this guy, this boss, this big bad boss is going to leave. He is going to run. He's going to have a tail between his legs and he's going to run. If you look at his skills, if you look at what he can do, the nimble escape, disengage, the hide, again, this common goblin becomes a boss. Not much in intelligence, only charisma is the only thing that drives this boss, telling others what to do, but he's still a coward. He's still a common goblin. He's being the leader. So now he sits there, everybody else dies, and now guess what? This guy's in charge. And what's going to happen to him? He's going to die. Because once the party hero, you have a group of six players, 6 heroes. They just take out all the goblins. And finally, they get to the goblin boss. They're going to find an empty throne. That dude is going to jump from his throne and he's going to leave. He's going to find a tunnel or an escape and he's going to run. But what he's going to do? He's going to either find reinforcements somewhere else and try to bullshit his way with other goblins in order to come back and take out the players. Or maybe not. Maybe in your games, that boss is going to sit and fight. I don't know about you guys, but I don't see him sitting and fighting. I see that goblin boss running. 6 players just took out 10 or more goblins. 6 heroes. And the goblin boss is going to sit there. Is he going to ponder? Is he going to wait and say, wait, I'm going to wait until they get up to me and then do something? No. He has one of his abilities. He takes a goblin, he changes places with the goblin. I think he's going to run. I think he's going to run as far as he can. So when the heroes get to the point of no return, and then they're going to see an empty throne. Might as well give your players treasure because that goblin just jumped and gone. So the good thing is, as a DM, goblins, you've seen anime. You've seen anime and the way they use goblins. They're vicious. They tear people apart. Yeah, I'm not saying they're not vicious. They're cool to use. They're awesome to use. Their strategy, they could overrun a party if used well. You have your mace goblins, you have your dagger goblins, however you want to use them tactically. And if you use them tactically, they could overrun a party. But don't get me wrong, when everything is turned around and the goblins come at you and the party takes out the goblins, that goblin boss will run. Mark my words. Now, in DM Dungeon Mastery, okay, vicious but cowardly. Yes, agreed. That's awesome. Thank you for your comment. DM Dungeon Mastery said vicious but cowardly. Indeed. I don't know how y'all use goblins, but the way I use them, there's normally somebody, an NPC, maybe a human NPC, maybe someone with a lot of magic, a lot of control, that uses the goblins for their own devices. You can use them how you want. And you don't have to use them only in caverns. You can use them anywhere. Bring them in. Maybe they were slaves. Maybe they were brought in by this mage, or however you want to use them. Goblins are very cool to use. Indeed. Tomorrow night, that's all I have for you with goblins. I don't know about you guys. I give the goblin boss, before I get into the final thoughts for creatures of the realm, goblins boss, I give a B. I gave the just the basic goblin a lower rating. That's because it's a basic goblin. They're not much, but the disengage and hide ability makes it above average. So I gave it some form of a rating. The goblin boss, I give a B+. Why? Because he's the main guy in the background, and he does have very cool abilities. And as a whole, the common goblin, the goblin boss, I give them a little bit, both of them a B. So you guys can use goblins in your games however you see fit, and hopefully they'll make your games fun. Because number one rule as a game master or DM, when you're playing a game, you got to make it fun for everybody. If everybody's having fun and you're having fun as a DM, great. And you know what? The whole strategy in your map is wonderful too. Because when you have that strategy in your games, and the party's having a blast fighting the goblins, because they are fun to fight. They really are. I've played many games with goblins, and I've had one hell of a time. Either way, final thoughts. You guys can use, DMs can use goblins how you see fit. They don't have to be in tunnels and caverns. Although their backstory, that's what they do. They live in the Underdark, in the tunnels. That's where they go. Maybe you have a party of a forest. They find this cave. They go in the cave. They found a goblin lair. That's up to you guys, how you want to run it in your game. Either way, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central, I have a big game, part 4 of Drow City. Join us tomorrow for part 4, episode 8 of campaign season 2, The Light. Join us. We have a lot. Thank you for your support. And the folks that subscribe, the folks that like, join us. We have a great game, and I will see you guys tomorrow night. Thank you for watching. At 11:45 tonight, we have DM Talk. I have a lot to talk to you about, different subject matter, and I'll see you guys for DM Talk in 15 or 20 minutes. See you later.